when Arman Halim's private jet touched down 2 days earlier than scheduled. The city beneath, the runway lights had no idea it was about to witness the quiet collapse of a carefully staged life. Arman was the kind of self-made, millionaire people wrote profiles about software prodigy turned investor, known for discipline, humility, and a stubborn loyalty to family that shaped every decision he made. He had left for Zurich believing his world was secure, a penthouse overlooking the river, a fiancée admired for her elegance, and a mother he trusted would be treated with dignity in his absence. His early return was meant to be a surprise, a bouquet-in-hand kind of gesture. Instead, it would become a reckoning. The driver dropped him at the building's private entrance, and Arman waved him off, choosing to walk the last stretch alone, savoring the idea of catching Sana mid-laugh, perhaps planning their wedding. The elevator hummed softly as it climbed, each floor a step closer to a life he thought he knew. When the doors opened to his floor, the hallway lights glowed warmly, but the air felt wrong, too still like a held breath. He unlocked the door quietly, intending to step inside unseen, when a sharp sound cut through the calm. It wasn't loud enough to alarm neighbors, but it was unmistakable, the slap of a shoe against skin, followed by a brittle, pleading voice he recognized instantly. His mother's. "Please," she said, her voice thin, trembling like paper held over flame. Arman froze. The flowers slipped from his grip and scattered across the marble, petals bruising as if they too understood what was breaking. He moved forward on instinct, each step measured, controlled, because rage, he had learned, was a fire best contained until it could be aimed. From the living room doorway, he saw his mother, Aisha Halim, small and stooped, her hands raised not in defense but in apology, the way women of her generation had been taught to endure. Sana stood over her, impeccably dressed even at home, heel lifted in a gesture of dominance that was practiced almost casual. "You're useless," Sana snapped, her voice sharp as cut glass. "Always in the way. Can't you do one thing right?" Aisha flinched, and that flinch did something irreversible to Arman. He didn't shout. He didn't rush forward. He watched, memorized the tilt of Sana's chin, the impatience in her eyes, the cruelty she wore as confidence. This was not an accident. It was a habit. Sana's heel came down again. Not a savage blow, but a humiliating nudge that sent Aisha stumbling back against the sofa. Arman stepped into the room then, his presence a sudden gravity shift. "Enough," he said, his voice calm, so calm it was terrifying. Sana turned, surprise flickering across her face before it rearranged itself into a smile meant to disarm. "Arman, you're early," she said lightly, as if he'd walked in on a dinner party instead of a desecration. Aisha sagged with relief at the sound of her son's voice, tears slipping free now that the pretense of strength was no longer required. Arman crossed the room, knelt before his mother and took her hands in his. They were cold. "Ami," he murmured, switching to the language of home. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though the truth was written in the tremor of her fingers. "I'm fine," she whispered, trained to minimize pain. Arman stood slowly, deliberately, placing himself between his mother and Sana. "Pack your things," he said. Sana laughed, a brittle sound. "Don't be dramatic." She slipped. "I was just—" "Stop," Arman said, and the single word carried the weight of a verdict. He didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. "I saw, I heard. And what I didn't see, I can imagine, because cruelty leaves patterns." Sana's smile faltered. "You're choosing her over me?" she demanded, incredulous. Arman met her gaze. "I'm choosing decency," he replied. "You will not speak to my mother again. You will not touch her. You will leave." The room seemed to shrink as Sana's mask cracked, anger flaring where charm had failed. "You think you're better than everyone because you're rich," she spat. Arman's expression didn't change. "No," he said. "I think I'm responsible, because I invited you into my home." He called security, not with drama but with resolve, and as they arrived, Sana's protests turned to accusations, then to threats. Arman listened without flinching, because his attention was already elsewhere, on his mother's breathing, on the way her shoulders eased. As the door finally closed behind Sana, silence settled like dust after a collapse. Arman helped Aisha to the armchair, wrapped a shawl around her, and poured her tea the way she liked it, strong and sweet. "I'm sorry," he said, the apology heavy with years of trust misplaced. Aisha reached for his cheek. "You came when I needed you," she said. "That is enough." But Armand knew enough was not enough. He understood in that moment that love required action, not apologies, and that the real work, the reckoning, the justice, the rebuilding, had only just begun. If this story has already stirred something in you, stay with us, subscribe to the channel now, because what Armand does next will shock everyone who thought money was power, and prove that character is the only wealth that truly matters.